Hi, in this part of the Blender beginner course, we will add materials and colors to the objects. And don't forget to watch the earlier parts. If you are interested in learning the latest 3D techniques, particularly in Blender, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Before we begin, let me introduce our Asset Store website, where you can explore a variety of free and premium assets. We offer high-quality game-ready assets and also Blender projects, all of which you are free to use in any of your projects. So be sure to check out our store at store.blackcave.com. To add colors to the scene, we need materials, and for that, we need to go to the shading section. This is the material, and I'll explain it. The viewport is in material mode, and we can switch to other modes using the Z key. Material mode shows the colors in light angles, but it's not the final render. When selecting an object, its material appears in the bottom window. Each object has a default material. We can delete it and create a new one. Pressing the new button adds a material to the object. Let's rename it. The material window is a node-based view. This node is called a shader and it has many attributes. All these attributes are inputs and we can change their values or assign other nodes to them. There are many nodes, like textures and calculator nodes, that we can connect to the inputs. Next to the inputs, we have output nodes. There is only one output from this node, which is connected to the final material and surface input, representing the object. We can directly change the color. We can also connect an image, called a texture, to it. This input makes the object metallic. Roughness makes the object appear wet or rough. A value of 1 makes it fully rough. The normal input adds bumps to the surface and we need to connect a normal map to it. The specular determines the level of light reflection on the surface and how much the light spreads. By changing the IOR level, we can see the changes. Lower values reduce reflection. Sheen adds a shine effect around the object. Let's add a sphere, as this attribute works better on spheres. Press Shift A and add an icosphere. Right click on it and select Shade Smooth. Let's change the attributes of this material as well. The weight of the sheen controls the intensity of the shininess around the object. We can also change the effect color using the tint. The roughness value adjusts the spread of the sheen effect. Emission makes the object glow. We can change the color, but higher strength values usually turn it white. Alright, we have adjusted the inputs manually. Now let's add nodes by pressing Shift A. There are many sections, each with several nodes. To add textures to the scene, we need a texture node. The texture node has two outputs. The first is the color, which gives the RGB of the image, and the second is alpha, which controls the opacity. We can easily connect each output to the inputs. Now let's add textures. You can see multiple textures here. The first one is the base color or albedo, which contains the RGB values for the main color of the object. It's 2K and sometimes called diffuse, but the diffuse texture has some differences. The next is AO, which adds shadows to the object. Darker areas means more shadows. Next is the normal map, which adds bumps to the object. This is an image of the material preview, and next is the roughness map. More white areas indicate more roughness. I downloaded these textures from Quicksilver software. I introduced it in the tutorial here. Now we can open each of these textures using the open button. First, I want to load the base color texture. There are some attributes related to the texture node that I'll explain. We can also drag the texture directly into the material window. Now we need to connect the color to the base color. Alpha is for opacity and I don't need it. We can also close the loaded texture or open another one. With this folder icon, we can load another texture and replace the current one. And make sure the albedo texture is set to sRGB in the color space attribute. Next, connect the color to the base color of the material. It looks bad on the icosphere. Let's add another object. I think a plane will work better. Instead of creating a new material, let's rename the spheres material and assign it to the plane object. You can select the material from the material list. The material has been assigned and it looks good. These materials are applied based on the concept called UV, which you can set in the UV editing section. I haven't covered that yet. Next, let's add a roughness texture. It will apply smooth and rough areas based on this grayscale texture. In Blender, we have the ability to connect the texture or any node to the surface input and see its preview. Or we can connect the roughness. We also have a keyboard shortcut for that. Ctrl-Shift, then click on the node. Make sure the add-on called Node Wrangler is active in the Preferences and Add-on section. Now connect the roughness to the roughness input. But we need to change the color space to non-color. RGB is mainly used for albedo. Some areas appear wet and others are rough with this texture, but it's weak because the texture is mostly white, with no noticeable differences between black and white. Press Ctrl and right click to cut a connection and see the differences. Now let's drag the normal map into the project. We need to change its color space to the non-color as well. We can't connect it directly to the normal input. We need a node called normal map first. Shift A and search for the normal map node. We need to connect the texture to the color input. Now some bumps have appeared on the surface. Let's check the differences. We can increase or decrease the intensity of the normal map using the strength field. Okay, these are all my setups. Now let's improve the material. I want to increase the contrast of roughness, meaning the black areas will get darker and the white areas will get brighter. In preview mode, you can see that the differences between black and white areas are very small. Here we need a node called brightness and contrast to connect the roughness. If I place the node here, it will automatically connect to the roughness. And the result goes to the roughness after applying the contrast. If I activate the preview mode on the contrast node, I can see its preview as well as the preview of the nodes connected to it. Now let's adjust the contrast. Also, you can adjust the brightness if needed. Let's go back to the material view and you'll see the surface is wet with some rough areas. Now we can adjust it using the contrast value. We can also add more calculator nodes to make the material more complex. Now let's add the ability to make the base color darker or brighter. To do this, we need a node called Mix Color. Mix Color will combine two texture or colors using the factor value. For example, the base color is connected to the A input and the B input is white. If the factor is close to 0, the A input will be applied more to the surface and vice versa. This is the capability of the Mix Color node. Let's add another texture to connect to the B input. I think this texture works well. As you can see, the color is switching between texture A and B. You can also change the operation. There are many options and in our scenario we need multiply. Now color A will be multiplied by color B based on factor. Each color we choose for B will change the result. Let's pick a dark color. Now we have the ability to make the texture darker. Additionally, we can add an effect called displacement, which can be applied to the surface using modifiers. But it takes some steps, which I've explained in the tutorial here that you can watch. It will add real bumps, change the surface shape, and make the surface look more realistic. Okay, our work with the material is done. Now let's add another 3D model to the scene. I downloaded this model from Quixel Bridge and it includes several textures. For example, it has several normal maps, which are for optimization. The first texture is the most detailed one. Additionally, there are multiple 3D models in FBX format, which is a common format for 3D models. The first FBX has more vertices and more detail. Let's add it to the scene. We need to go to the file, then import and choose FBX. And then select the model. Move it with the G key. It's very small, so we need to scale it using the S key. By pressing the Tab key, you'll see the vertices. Let's create a material for it and connect the textures. If this node, the shader node, doesn't exist, you can add it from the shader menu. There are a lot of shaders, for example a shader for hair, for glass and so on. We need the principal BSDF shader. Let's add the textures. Okay, good. You can add many other textures for other inputs. For example, metallic input uses a grayscale texture like roughness. You can even create your own textures. Or you can use an RGB texture for the emission. In the next part, we will create a complete scene by adding lights, applying materials, and finally rendering the scene. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And feel free to share your questions and ideas in the comments.